My health fell apart at 46. I developed a rare eye condition and it changed everything. It forced me to evaluate my health as a whole and I found it wanting. The truth is, I'd prioritised other parts of my life instead. In this video, I'll tell you the 5 biggest health mistakes I was making and why. So if you're making them, then you can put some changes in place too. And I'll also tell you what I now do instead. And if we've not met, hi, I'm Ruth. I'm a registered health coach and I make videos for over 50s women who want to make healthy habits stick. And as ever, this is just for information and just what I do. You do you, because health is personal. Firstly, a little bit of context. Let me take you back to December 2020. We were right in the middle of the COVID pandemic. I was a consultant radiologist in a busy NHS hospital here in the UK. And as a specialist in lung imaging, I was kind of busy. I worked long hours, my breakfast was rushed, I drove to work. I then needed a good couple of coffees to get me going in the morning. Lunch, well, that was a very rushed affair, usually in front of my reporting workstation with a sandwich in one hand, my dictaphone in the other. I usually left work late, again, drove home, cooked my dinner for me and my husband, and then usually just flopped in front of the sofa watching TV because I was too exhausted to do anything else. I was also really stressed quite a lot of the time, and this had a big impact on my sleep. I could usually get to sleep okay, but I'd find myself waking up in the early hours worrying about everything and nothing. Now everything changed on Christmas Day when I woke up in excruciating eye pain. I'm not going to go into detail because I've made an entire video about it, which I'll link in the description box below, but essentially it changed my life forevermore. I'd unfortunately developed a chronic pain condition involving my eyes that was wholly incompatible with staring at 3 computer screens for 9 hours a day. So I unfortunately had to give up my job. I took ill health retirement from the NHS, and as a consequence of that, I gave up my license to practice medicine as a doctor. Now, the journey back to a reasonable quality of life, well, it was long and more than a little rocky. And it forced me to think really hard about my health. And I did then gradually start to make some really significant changes. So these were the 5 biggest mistakes I was making. The last one's slightly different because it involves a specific incident, but I think there's a really important lesson, so I'm still sharing it. Now, I hated sport at school, really detested sport at school. I was crap at pretty much everything. I was in the slow running group. When it was hockey class, out on the field in the middle of winter, I'd be the one huddling in the back of the field, not getting involved, getting chapped knees and just feeling very sorry for myself. And I was obviously always the last to be picked in any team sport. And this gave me a bit of a hang up about it, and it persisted into my university years where I did absolutely no sport whatsoever. I didn't do any exercise. I then obviously qualified as a doctor, and my only exercise was running around the wards all day, although to be fair, that did give me a pretty decent step count. Now, I did try joining a gym several times, and I did what I suspect a lot of women do, which is join, you're keen for a couple of weeks, and then you just kind of get a bit bored and stop going, and eventually you cancel your membership because you realise you're just not getting your money's worth. So I did that multiple times and never really enjoyed it. I then tried running, I joined a local running group. I didn't really enjoy running either. It did culminate in me completing, I say completing because I walked, the London Marathon for charity in 2016, which was a triumph of stubbornness over sense, in all honesty, and I've never run since. And then I finally did find a gym I sort of enjoyed going to, and what made the difference was seeing a personal trainer and getting some individual attention and me starting to see a few mild results. But honestly, I was probably going more for the kind of aesthetics than the fitness. And then COVID hit and obviously everything stopped and gyms closed, and that was the end of that. And I got pretty busy. Now, after getting sick, I kind of did my reading and I realised how important it was to do exercise, particularly strength work, when it came to bone health and metabolic health. And yet, because I wasn't getting any younger, I really needed to do something to make going to the gym more enjoyable because, frankly, I decided it was pretty much non-negotiable. So how did I get myself into a state of enjoying the gym for life? Well, Firstly, I increased my motivation because I did some reading, I got some knowledge, I realised how important it was. And when you realise how important it is, i.e. I didn't want to be a frail, immobile old lady, I want to stay fit, kind of well into my 80s, hopefully. And armed with that knowledge, that kind of gives you some motivation. So I also tapped into the science of behavioural change, and that was by making trips to the gym both easier and more rewarding. Now, when it came to making it easier, my solution was to hire another personal trainer. Now, I acknowledge here that I'm in the privileged position of being able to afford one, and not everyone can. But you may well be able to find yourself an accountability buddy in the form of a partner or a friend or a colleague. And the other thing was to make the whole gym experience more rewarding. I use it as my little me time to listen to a really good podcast or catch up on an audio book if I'm not seeing the personal trainer. Otherwise, headphones would be a bit rude. So what did I do wrong? Well, obviously not starting exercise early enough, particularly resistance exercise or strength training. We start to lose muscle from our early 30s onwards, so I was about 15 years too late to the muscle party. Plus, I don't really have the body type that builds muscle easily. It takes a lot of work, and obviously then that's not that motivating. So obviously finding out how important it was, that's given me the impetus to get going and accepting that it's never too late to start doing a little bit of exercise. Now, my next mistake was thinking that I could get away with eating pretty much anything because I was a normal body weight. And yeah, I absolutely love pasta, rice and bread. I absolutely love my carbs. So then two things happened. Firstly, I paid attention to my family genetics. We have a very strong family history of pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes, and type 1 diabetes, but type 2 diabetes in people who are normal body weight and slim. I also started to study nutrition. Now, I did some as a health coach, but I wanted more. I wanted to go deeper. So I'm currently doing a master's in clinical nutrition back at university. And the truth is, once we go through the menopause, women, we start to get something called insulin resistance. And this is where the cells in our body literally become more resistant to the hormone insulin. So they don't take the blood sugar, the glucose out of the blood and into the cells as efficiently. And going back to my family, you may well ask, well, how do slim people get type 2 diabetes? I thought it was a disease associated with being overweight. And in the majority of cases, it is. But there's two things here. So firstly, genetics, that plays a role. And obviously, my family don't have great genetics on the diabetic front. And secondly, it's possible to be a normal body weight and be carrying too much visceral fat. So that's the deep belly fat that's associated with inflammatory and metabolic conditions. And you can have an excess of visceral fat and still be a normal body weight. I can make an entire video on it if you would like. Just let me know in the comments below. Now, I know that some people will argue with me here because nutrition is incredibly contentious, but from my interpretation of the evidence base, there is nothing wrong with eating carbohydrates per se. It's just the type of carbohydrate that's important. And we need to be stepping away from the refined carbohydrates. So this is your white bread, your white rice, your white pasta, pastries, etc. Anything that has a high glycemic index, which means it quickly releases its glucose into the bloodstream when it's digested. And this is in contrast to the low glycemic index carbohydrates, like vegetables, like whole grains, and the legumes and the beans. These are both high in fibre and release their energy slowly, and they're associated with multiple health benefits, including a lower risk of diabetes and heart disease and increased longevity. So these days I eat a lot less carbohydrate and I stick to the complex low glycemic index ones. But again, I wish I'd done this earlier because my digestive system feels so much better from the increased fibre. And yes, I still do enjoy bread, I just make my own with nuts and seeds in it instead. The 90s, my heyday, when Gen X went to university. Things are very different now. It's perfectly acceptable to turn up on your first day of uni with a green smoothie and a yoga mat. Back then, less so. I think the drinking culture was everything. It was the whole work hard, play hard ethos, and I think a lot of us indulged. And it was particularly bad at medical school. I once drank 9 pints of lager, fell over and actually broke a bone and ended up in the emergency department. I wish I was making this up for comedy effect, but I'm not. Now, of course, I calmed down when I qualified and became a doctor, but being a resident doctor was really tough. And as with a lot of people, alcohol can become a way of winding down after a busy shift or at a weekend. I didn't drink excessively, but I still did use alcohol as a way of decompressing slightly, and this continued into my early 40s. Now, I absolutely love a nice glass of wine. I consider it one of life's pleasures, but it's very easy to overdo it and feel slightly muzzy-headed the next day. And with my cynical hat on, there's also a lot of marketing around midlife drinking aimed at women. Wine o'clock, anyone? But the problem is alcohol plus the menopause is a bit of a disaster zone, and it can be really detrimental to sleep in particular. Obviously, alcohol can help you get to sleep, but what it tends to do is wake you up in the early hours and then keep you awake. And it can also make hot flushes or hot flashes worse as well. It can contribute to menopause anxiety, and it also increases your risk of breast cancer. And at a time in life when we're trying to avoid collecting that midsection weight, that visceral fat, alcohol is essentially empty calories. And finally, it's not very good for the liver. And the liver is amazing. It's literally a detox machine. Now, there's a lot of convincing reasons to give it up. Now, I haven't completely given it up, but I do recognise that my sleep is a lot better without it. So I limit myself to 1 glass in an evening, and I'll do this once at a push twice a week. Unless I'm on holiday, then it's a few times more, and I feel so much better for it. Now, the 20-year-old me will call me boring, but the 50-year-old would reply with a "you'll see" and a knowing look that suggests, as well as there being way more to life than alcohol, they might go on to develop an infatuation with department store John Lewis and own an entire cupboard of Tupperware just to horrify them. Now, I can't undo any health impacts from my younger years, but I can look after myself moving forward, and this works for me. Now, maybe you're one of those people who tells yourself, but I've always been a worrier, so I'll always be a worrier. But then, doesn't that become a self-fulfilling prophecy? And I'll tell you how to change it. Now, like a lot of introverts, I live most of my life in my own brain. I procrastinate, I plan, and sometimes I whirl things over in my brain too much and they become a worry. Plus, when I was younger, I used to worry a lot about the judgment of others. Was I pretty enough? Was I smart enough? Was I funny enough? Stylish enough? All that crap. Now, I think in midlife, a lot of women undergo an epiphany where, frankly, you no longer care what people think about you, particularly how you look, and that is quite freeing. And whilst that certainly makes life easier, what really changed for me was learning about something called the growth mindset. Now, that was described by psychologist Carol Dweck. Now, this says that traits are not fixed, you can change things, you can grow, you can evolve as a person, so you're not always destined to be a worrier. And in my opinion, one of the best ways to change is to get yourself a toolbox of things to deal with stress. Now, one of my favourite tools is to use something called a worry diary, where you park all those repetitive worries to a certain point in a day when you deal with them in a systematic fashion. I've made a video about stress tools and I've made a video dedicated to a worry diary, and I'll link both of those at the end. And some of my other favourites are slow breathing, which calms the nervous system by activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and mindful meditation. Now, I still have my moments where the worries do build up a little bit, but now I've got my toolkit to use at will, and that makes things better. And finally, a story. Now, I suspect I'm not alone in this. Like a lot of women, get a little bit lax about self-examination of the boobs. And I hadn't done it for a while. This was a couple of years ago, and then I found a lump. So I went to see my GP, who said, yeah, I can feel a lump, it's pretty hard. And he referred me on the 2-week wait pathway. Now, for those of you not in the UK, this is the NHS pathway for dealing with a suspected cancer, where you get referred up to see a specialist within 2 weeks. I think it's something the NHS does pretty well. So off I went up to the breast clinic, which was, not a particularly pleasant experience. I saw a very nice surgeon, and his first question was, how long has the lump been there? And then obviously I couldn't answer that because I couldn't remember the last time I'd examined, and I literally had no idea. And that was a real wake-up call. Now, luckily, It turned out to be benign. It was a cyst. It had got a bit inflamed, which is why it was so hard. They drained it, it went away. And I've been back a couple of times with recurrent cysts since, and they get drained and go away. Then every few years, another one seems to come along. But it was a wake-up call because it could so easily have not had such a happy ending. Now 150 women a day in the UK are diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was very lucky not to be one of them. And like any cancer, the odds are significantly improved by catching it early, so it is really important to self-examine on a monthly basis and get used to how your boobs feel so you notice any changes quickly. So I learned my lesson, and you can sign up to a great UK charity called Copperfield. They don't know I'm promoting them. I'll put their details below, but they're really good. You give them your text number and they text you on the 1st of each month with a little reminder, usually with an amusing poem. They've also got a lot of really good information on their website. So those were my 5 biggest health mistakes. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want insights on health and habits in your inbox every Friday with absolutely no spam, then sign up to the Wise Women's Wellbeing newsletter. I'll put the link in the description box. And if you want to watch those 2 videos on managing stress, I'll put them here and I'll see you there.